It's Tuesday, July 18th.
And this news, I don't know. There's something terrible. It's just not even real news because all we've taken is a bunch of news stories and glued them together into one news program.
So we got a couple of follow-ups. A lot of people have complained that we're not doing corrections like we always used to, but I mean, there's some little things. I don't think we've had any huge corrections.
Yeah, we definitely not missed anything huge.
We haven't given up on corrections, but we're not going to pander to every little, it's like, oh, this was 0.5, not 0.6. What's wrong with you? No, we're not going to do that. So don't think that you're going to play that little game. Anyway, follow-ups. We do have follow-ups.
Oh, there's so many follow-ups. The first is Visa. Visa is considering extending the war on cash to business incentives outside the U.S. So we always talk about the war on cash and how businesses are like, we must track everything in cash transactions. We don't need that. It comes up in India a lot. But here's an article actually talking about Visa offering business incentives, as in cash money, to convert to a cashless business, which I didn't think was possible under U.S. law.
So the war on cash, it's sort of following a very predictable cycle. It started out, I think, like maybe mid 2016, which is about when we started doing this, right?
Yeah.
There is no war on cash. These are just alternatives. Why would, no, cash is freedom. There's no war on cash. And then that slowly sort of like, well, criminals use cash and that's not good. And now it's literally, Visa is calling this the next step in their war on cash. That's a quote. So what they're doing here is cash transactions cost nothing, basically. Like there's a little bit of overhead. You got to drive it to the bank and you got to deal with that and accounting and stuff. But credit card transactions, they actually charge you money as a business to process credit cards. If you buy a shirt on the Level1 store, that we eventually pay for that. That costs us a little bit of money.
A percentage and a per transaction fee, both.
Yeah. So Visa's saying, hey, we'll just give you a big barrel of cash up front and you stop taking cash. And it's pretty crazy, and it seems to be working, at least with some large businesses.
Now, this is actually outside the U.S. because, again, I'm not sure that this would fly under U.S. law for a lot of reasons.
They're extending it from the U.S. to the outside of the U.S.
So I don't know. But I don't know how this. Maybe some lawyers can comment on this. So I don't know why. I don't know how this is possible under U.S. law for you to buy something from a store and not pay cash. I mean, that seems like. I didn't think that was possible. I thought you could always give cash for things.
Well, it might not be possible yet. Actually, now that I read these bullet points, it looks like they are starting in the UK. That did not come across in the tone of the story. But anyway, eventually, if it works elsewhere,
it's definitely a war on cash.
It will come here. Now, you talked about India and Modi, and he is all about the war on cash. He wants everything tracked. He wants everything biometric, and they have that terrible database we've talked about. So this is coming. This is pretty much something that I don't see being stopped.
Now, this is definitely something that we've brought up in the correction segment of past news episodes, but this strikes me as sort of an anti-correction. This is more of a told you so.
Yeah, a lot of people are like, you're being crazy. You take off your tinfoil hat. They love it. Tinfoil hat's such an overused phrase. Nobody's going to take your cash. Well, they're literally looking to take your cash. And they're doing it by incentivizing the people you spend your cash with to no longer take your cash.
And the people that will or will not take your cash don't really care. Whatever makes them more money, right, they're going to be all about. I mean, if you really want to go down the rabbit hole on this whole credit card transaction thing, I mentioned that it's a percentage and a flat fee. Most people don't realize this, and the payment card industry doesn't really want you to know this, but the percentage usually goes to Visa or whoever the credit card holder is, but the per transaction fee almost universally does not actually go to Visa. The per transaction fee is almost like a pyramid scheme because whoever your credit card processor is, like the people that actually provide the connectivity back to Visa, they're the ones that get that. And a lot of their sales programs, if they can get you to use, some plug-in for this or some plug-in for that to actually plug into the Visa backend, they will get those transactional pennies, those fixed amounts per transaction. Some of it goes to insurance and things like that, but it's almost, I would describe it as a pyramid scheme when you really look at it. It's not fraudulent or anything, but it's like, wow, it's no wonder this is adopted everywhere. This is crazy because everybody's palm is getting greased the whole way down, but Visa controls everything.
The other thing you have to keep in mind here is that these credit card companies are not required to give Walmart, for example, service. And it's not unheard of for small businesses to get a bunch of fraud complaints. And some big credit card company like American Express just comes in and they're like, we're pulling our cards. No more American Express here. We think you're stealing from us. So if they agree to this, then they might not be thinking it through because they're creating a situation where they could literally just be shut down by saying, okay, no one uses cash anymore and they're not going to use credit cards at your locations.
Speaking of things that are dying, it turns out cable TV subscriptions are dying, but Amazon Prime subscriptions are set to overtake cable TV subscriptions.
Now, this is a follow-up to Netflix, which has overtaken cable TV subscriptions.
Isn't that interesting? Bezos is taking over the universe one transaction at a time. You know, we didn't include it. There was a Wall Street Journal op-ed that was saying that the Postal Service was selling stuff below cost to Amazon, and Amazon's taking over the universe and destroying small business and things like that. But I don't think that article took into account the whole sunk costs thing.
We don't link to the Wall Street Journal. No paywalls. Don't go to paywall sites. No, you have to keep in mind here that you get a lot more with Prime. You don't just get movies and video and stuff like that. Their selection is kind of crappy. I don't know. You ever look through it?
Yeah, it's not very good.
It's not great, but it's free, and more people are adopting. They're looking to get Prime into the lower income brackets by reducing the price if you're on welfare and giving it away free to students. I think they've done that for a while. So, like, most people above a certain income already have Prime, and they're trying to get it in all the households. So pretty soon this chart's probably going to cross over.
Now, I have noticed that Prime does seem to be experimenting on me in that I will get a recommendation, and it's like, oh, yeah, I actually would watch that. And I click on it. It's like, no, you have to buy that. And it's like, wait, I thought I was just looking at the stuff that I had as part of my Prime membership. I don't understand what happened here.
Yeah, they do tend to gate it a little bit.
So, yeah, I don't know. But, so not really surprising here that cable TV... this graph doesn't look enough like a cliff for my taste. If this is cable TV subscriptions on the top here, I would expect this to just, go straight down. It's not really going down all that much.
I think it's probably changing as the older generation dies. Like, it's just, forever going to fall. There's no new people picking it up.
Now, a couple of weeks ago, we reported that international travelers have been having their face scanned for God knows how long, and it was sort of surreptitiously included as a convenience factor from the airlines themselves. I think Delta and a couple others among them. Well, somebody asked the Department of Homeland Security for comment, and it's like, how do we opt out of this terrible program? Is there a way? And yeah, you totally can opt out by not traveling.
Same way that you can opt out of the AT&T arbitration clause by not using the internet.
Oh my goodness. So if you want a little bit more enlightenment on the whole international travel thing, and yes, they are scanning your face, and yes, they are keeping track of all of that, then you should totally check that out. I mean, it's not like anybody's talking about the National Fingerprint Database or the Biometrics Database or the Face Scan Database.
There's not a ton of new information. I mean, we pretty much told you last week, they're scanning your face. And the only new thing here is when somebody called them out on it, they were like, yes, shut up, we're doing it.
Correction, so, was that last week or was that a prior week?
It blurs together.
Gotcha. No. Another follow-up. The EFF has officially appealed the Tim Berners-Lee decision on DRM. Now, this we did cover, I think, pretty sure this was last week.
Yeah, I think it was.
There's never been an appeal in the W3C policy. Basically, the W3C has accepted DRM standards for the web, meaning that browsers that implement the W3C standards will implement standards allowing for copy-protected content that do not provide a mechanism for accessibility, that do not provide any kind of covenant not to sue security researchers and people that are verifying that these, DRM codecs are at least safe from a security aspect to run. So this is just an article that explains the position of that, and you should totally read it. It's a very, very good, very clear argument for why there is more of a downside to DRM on the web than just not being able to access, commercial content.
There's also, they bring up the important point of why is this guy not willing to even discuss this anymore? Because in the beginning, it seemed like he was like, well, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, let's talk about that. And then at some point, he was just like, no, I'm in charge. We're doing it this way. And the quote here was, I'm not sure why he's willing to die on this hill. I have a theory. It might include duffel bags full of cash.
Tim Berners-Lee, duffel bags full of cash? No, say it ain't so. No. Okay, with all of our corrections and follow-up out of the way, our headline story for this week, although honestly, it's a little bit of a non-story, but I get excited about these things, so it's probably okay. He's going to try to keep me in check. I don't know if it's going to work out, but we're going to try it. Oh, AMD Ryzen Threadripper. AMD has leaked just a few more details, and so everybody has to rush to cover the few more details, even though Threadripper's technically not available yet. EPYC, the server component, is out, at least for OEMs. So, Dell and HP and companies like that are building systems with EPYC. Threadripper is the desktop counterpart. There are going to be two Threadripper components, a 16-core and a 12-core. The 16-core is priced at $999. The 12-core, I think, is priced at $750.
Now, we've only seen testing from AMD. I don't think there's been a lot of independent, nobody's got their hands on this to really test it. And we do have to take a moment of pause and go back and think about what Intel promised. And then when that got out in the wild, it's a little warm, runs a little warm.
Yeah, a little warm.
Overclocking, maybe not what they promised it would be. But if what they're telling us is true at these price points, I think you can call it. I think you can call the match at this point.
Yeah.
There is no coming back for Intel. They cannot win at these prices with this kind of performance.
They're going to need to improve their stuff. Now, AMD doesn't win at absolutely everything, but for a lot of the kinds of workloads that we have seen in the enterprise, especially like the one-socket servers, I think the one-socket servers are going to be a real easy sell. In years gone by, the appeal to the enterprise of the two-socket server has been that you can get twice the performance for maybe 70% above the cost of a one-socket server. So it's like if I pay two sockets and I pay twice as much for the server, why wouldn't I just buy two one-socket servers? It doesn't make any sense because two one-socket servers is actually probably more redundant, more resilient against failure, depending on your software, than a single two-socket server. And so, AMD has got one and two socket servers, 16, 32, 64 cores inside a box, potentially. So you're talking about a ridiculous amount of CPU compute horsepower and a ridiculous amount of PCI Express bandwidth, much more PCI Express bandwidth than you have on the Xeon side. So getting data into and out of the CPU, they talk a lot about it in their presentation. And so it's a really exciting time to be doing a server refresh inside your data center. I mean, it's just looking really good. And
you talk about they don't win at everything, but the amount of money that you have to put toward winning by what, 10%, maybe 20?
Yeah.
Again, I think you got to call the match.
Yeah, the highest end Intel Xeon CPU, because the new Xeons have been announced from Intel, and they're a massive 3600 pin socket. I mean, it's massive, like the Threadripper, like the EPYC CPU, just a huge CPU. And the very top end part, I think, is about twice as expensive as the very top end AMD part. And so depending on what you're going for, density, throughput, number of cores, the performance per dollar ratio that you get from AMD is looking like it's going to be really compelling. And Intel's definitely not nervous. They're definitely pulling out all the stops. Their slide decks actually say, so they're new CPUs, so you send it to your OEM partners and you send it to, it's like, here's the presentation, here's what you need to know, press, here's everything that's going on. Intel literally says that the AMD EPYC processors are glued together desktop processors, which I don't think that's very, really, is that all you got? I mean, it seems like you could be more technical than that with the press.
Well, that's not all they've got. They also compare CPUs that should not be compared. They compare, like a $3,000 server CPU to Ryzen.
Ryzen 7, the $500 CPU.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, look how much better this is. Well, it's 3-4 times the cost. Maybe it should be a lot better. So they've definitely, they're counting on the tech media to not understand these nuances and run with these stories. And it's probably, some people probably will.
I think that, it's just not if you look at it, it's like, okay, they're using multiple dies, multiple pieces of silicon per CPU. This is something AMD has deliberately done as part of their strategy. This is not a bad strategy. This is actually a very good strategy. But I think it's really, really disingenuous for Intel to throw the first stone on that, because if you look at the Xeon X5650, that was two pieces of silicon under one metal lid. You look at the Pentium D and the Core 2 Quad; those were two pieces of silicon that were "quote unquote" glued together. So that strategy has totally worked in the past. Intel has totally used it. We've also seen in the past where Intel has said, oh my gosh, integrating the memory controller into the CPU, that is a terrible idea. That happened with the, I think the Athlon X2, and the Xeons at the time did not have an integrated memory controller. And then the very next generation of Xeons had an integrated memory controller, and it's like, wait, what are you doing, Intel? You were just saying that integrated memory controller was terrible, and your next generation product has an integrated memory controller. What changed? This smells like that situation all over again.
Yeah, well, it's too late to do anything but try and get as much money as you can for this generation. I mean,
up to and including trolling.
Yeah, you can't. There's nothing else you can do. So this is, I think, like, okay, they were sitting in a boardroom. It's like, all right, what can we do to get these things out of the warehouse and tell all the R&D people that get divorces. They're not going home until we win for real.
The last time this happened, Intel was ordered to pay $1.4 billion over anti-competitive tactics against AMD. This is still going on. Like, this case is still pending. This is over 10 years old. The last time that AMD had really awesome competitive products, we're talking about the Athlon X2 days. There was this court case, and the European Union found in favor of AMD, but it is still an ongoing case. There's some appeals and some other stuff, too much we don't want to get into here, but we will not forget.
This kind of goes back to the whole, war on cash thing. This is a very common thing that banks do, where it's like, okay, you're going to fine us, but the fine is like 10% of the value of the money that we got by violating these rules. So who cares?
Not to be outdone, but while we're on the topic, some numbers are coming out. I mean, Ryzen's been out for about 3 months now, and Ryzen may actually be clawing back some of the desktop market from Intel. Got this nice little article from Hot Hardware here, which shows a graph of, it's like, oh, there's not a nice little uptick there and a nice little downtick there. Now, to be sure, Intel is still dominating the market in terms of volume and all this other kind of thing. The Ryzen 3 CPUs are just barely out. We're starting to see benchmarks for Ryzen 3 and that sort of thing. And the Ryzen 3 is, the around $100 CPU market. So, sort of the low-end CPU market. But you see those in OEM machines and things like that. But AMD, not bad. I mean, this is for only a 3-month-old processor, for, the platform still having a few kinks to work out. This is really good.
It's important to note, these are only people who have used a certain kind of benchmark. So not everybody is going to benchmark their CPU, and not everybody's going to use the software, but it's pretty indicative. And another thing I think you have to consider here is the kind of people who are benchmarking their CPU a lot of those people are waiting for Threadripper.
Yeah.
They're like, I'm getting, the performance one. I want those benchmark scores to define my, my value as a person. I need to put these in my forum signature.
Guilty as charged. No, don't do that.
And so yeah, that's probably going to get a lot worse now that Threadripper's out, and it's way better and it's cheap.
Yeah, Threadripper should be actually available around the first week of August, although it looks like OEMs like Dell are going to have Threadripper-based PCs just ahead of general availability of the CPU for DIY people. So that's pretty interesting. But we'll report on that when it actually happens. We just thought the Intel slides were pretty salty, and we would point and laugh and say, well, let's wait and see how this actually shakes out. But Intel, come on, you don't need to do that. It's fine.
I think they do. I don't think they've got any other response.
This is kind of a follow-up, but there's some new information here. So, if you in the
let's preface this by saying that we didn't talk about the day of action,
the net neutrality day of action,
and that's on purpose. I did not put a story in about the day of action because the day of action isn't going to solve anything. It ain't going to matter. It didn't matter. And the funniest thing to happen during the day of action is that AT&T and Comcast and Verizon all had blog posts joining the day of action.
Wait, what are they up to here? Oh, they're saying that Congress should write the laws that govern net neutrality, and that they're all on board for net neutrality, and that it shouldn't be the FCC, it should be Congress that's writing the laws.
Yeah, but the problem with that is, if you understand the modern lobbying world and how all of that works, the lobbies write most of the laws, which means that these companies would be writing most of the laws. So the lobbyist, if you're a congressman, congressperson, do we have to say congressperson now in this horrible new world? Your job is so easy. I mean, it's ridiculously easy. Somebody gives you money And then they hand you a already done law. Here it is. It's written for you, and you sign it. That's all you got to do. And of course, campaign. So these guys are kind of saying, "Oh yeah, we're on board with this. Yeah, net neutrality, and we'll write it."
We're going to redefine what net neutrality is and make it the most horrible thing that you've seen. Now, it's not. It's like we're just two guys on the internet talking out of our ass. Well, yes. Be that as it may, this happened once before, the 1996 Telecommunications Act. As enacted, the 1996 Telecommunications Act was an entirely reasonable piece of legislation. It was designed to separate service providers from the physical infrastructure that they had, because companies saw the writing on the wall and said, hey, we don't want to be an electric company or a water company that are providing utility. We want to provide cool services like interactive video chat, and maybe this whole internet thing that's happening, but also all of these other, data packet based services that are being invented. The 96 Telecommunications Act was an epic disaster for taxpayers. Taxpayers paid a lot of money and got virtually nothing in return. This is what will happen if net neutrality is written there. We should absolutely not trust companies to write the laws, because when it happened with the 96 Telecommunications Act, it was an unmitigated disaster.
Yes. And changing your website for one day out of the year is basically putting a magnet on the back of your car. It is meaningless. You need to understand this, and you need to, I don't know what to tell you to do, except for get angry and don't accept this crap.
One thing that we could ask of Comcast, does everybody remember what happened the last time the net neutrality debate heated up? Here's a nice, article, Comcast Roundup. There was this graph, and so Comcast allowed its connections to the internet to become congested. Basically, people were paying them for connection to the internet. And Comcast, in my opinion, very disingenuously said, no, people are paying us for their connection to our network. They're not paying us for a connection to the internet that ultimately must get to the internet. They are paying for a connection to our network. Other people must pay us for access to our customers. They're trying to turn the argument around. You see that? And that's very clearly demonstrated by this graph. And so Comcast, basically, there was not enough connection to the internet to satisfy all of the Comcast subscribers that wanted to access Netflix content. So the graph shows that the speed to Netflix basically hit rock bottom. Netflix negotiated a deal with Comcast, and then all of a sudden, look at that, overnight, basically, the connection speed shot up. This is what happened during the first net neutrality debate before the FCC rules were enforced. If you would like to see Comcast not disingenuously participate in this, then two things need to happen. One, they need to roll back whatever agreement they've got with Netflix. Netflix needs to be able to comment on that publicly and be like, oh my gosh, we got a refund from all that money we gave Comcast to, do this internet thing. And two, Comcast needs to pledge publicly in a legally enforceable way that they will never do anything like that again, because that was bad behavior.
Now, the other part of this that's even more disgusting is that Netflix is not a company that supports net neutrality. See, now that Netflix has made deals with all these major providers, it has an advantage over anybody else that wants to get into the streaming game. So now, all of a sudden, they're in the good old boy club, and they're like, well, we paid our money.
Can't beat them, join them.
So how about you destroy our competition? So now they are not for net neutrality. And this is the way it works. It's like, they would have fought for it before at the bottom of that chart. They would have definitely fought for it. But now it's like, oh, wait, we can benefit from this? This is bad.
Switching gears, we've got to go down under, because things are always really terrible down under.
I don't know if we don't have an Uber story this week, but Australia is becoming the new Uber. There's always something terrible that's going on in Australia related to technology.
We always make fun of Australia and how things are really bad there. Well, it turns out your leadership doesn't have any understanding of technology. Maybe they just literally came from the outback and, they didn't see technology or grow up with technology. I don't know how it works down there, but it's really bad. So the Aussie Prime Minister says that the laws of math don't apply in Australia when it comes to encryption. This article is great. Like, these quotes, honestly, like, if you read these quotes, blood will shoot out your nose, because it's bad. It's really bad.
It's not the first time he's made insane statements like this. He's pretty well known for this, but this one in particular, it's on the topic of backdoors. So people who understand cryptography, which he clearly does not, are telling him, you cannot put a backdoor. A backdoor destroys the whole purpose of cryptography. And the laws of mathematics, if you add a backdoor, it's not secure anymore. And his response is, the laws of mathematics come second. The laws of Australia come first.
When they pressed him on the issue, his follow-up to that was even more insane, which was, well, I think the nerds have to figure out a way to do this. They have a moral obligation to make it work like it works in my head. And it's
which
I don't, this doesn't exist. It can't exist.
And I don't think that he has an idea in his head of how that could exist. I don't think that's possible because it is, it's a contradiction. But I don't think that will help the people of Australia because they're going to get these backdoors.
Yeah. And it seems like it's turtles all the way down, too, because they had some other politicians that had some incredibly ignorant quotes as well. And so I am so sorry. I am so sorry because it doesn't seem like anybody in the chain of command has any idea what's going on. Clearly, they have access to nerds that actually that actually know what's going on, but they won't listen to them. And that is a point where whatever, political machine your country operates on has failed.
Well, I think there's also a big problem of they have access to nerds who will tell them whatever they want to hear. And those are the ones who get the jobs.
That's just, yeah, it's bad.
A Jeep pie?
You there.
We're not any better.
Yeah, we're not any better. Switching gears ever so slightly, China wants in on this, and so China has told its communications carriers to block access to personal VPNs by February. So you have to figure out a way. Now, I've been there, and it turns out that China is actually very good at blocking a lot of encryption and VPN type technologies. It'll work for a day or so, even when you get really creative, and then it will stop working or it'll be throttled to the point that it's unusable.
Now, the big thing here, the reason they haven't done this before is because there are a lot of companies doing business in China internationally, or, like companies in other countries who have a Chinese presence, and they need to be able to communicate with their servers in other countries. And they use VPNs to do that, to get around the Great Firewall. And this will stop that from being a realistic way to do business. And it's like, are we going to have to pack up and leave China? And that has always stopped the government. It's like, are we really going to run all these foreign companies out of the country? But now they're saying, yeah, it's got to go. I think July something, they set a date. And after that date, no more. All the VPN companies are shutting down because they're like, hey, we got a letter, and it basically told us shut down or go to prison. So sorry, we're done.
So the last time I went to Taiwan, I accidentally went in sort of, quote unquote, the wrong telecom store to try to buy a SIM. And they were like, no, you're a foreign traveler. These SIMs work in mainland China. You don't want these. And I was like, well, why don't I want them? And they were like, the other SIMs work better. And I was talking to somebody locally, but apparently international travelers are basically expected to buy SIMs on a completely different network than Chinese citizens. And so if you're a Chinese citizen visiting Taiwan, you're supposed to be on a completely different network than an international visitor visiting Taiwan, which I thought was interesting, and I'm sure there's more to it than that. But it's apparently these SIMs work on mainland China. The other SIMs only work in Taiwan, and the ones that work in Taiwan were insanely fast. The ones that work in Taiwan and China, not so fast. Maybe part of it. Maybe part of spying on the citizenry. No idea.
Speaking of spying on the citizenry, we've talked a lot about the Alexa and the Google Home, and what's the other one?
Bixby?
Is that the Microsoft one?
No, that's
Cortana.
Cortana. Bixby's Samsung, because everybody wants in on the game.
Yeah. So anyway, the police actually will not reveal which brand this was. That's bad, I guess. I guess they, the company's like, please don't say our name. But what happened here is this thing actually called the cops. There was a domestic dispute, and a guy pulled a gun on his girlfriend or whoever, and he said, what are you going to do? Call the sheriffs? And so
the speaker called the sheriffs.
It was like, oh, call the sheriffs? Sure thing. The SWAT team showed up. There was a big showdown, all because this little device decided, hey, time to call the police.
Oh, just a little bit of AI there. I mean, I don't know. How would Cortana react to like domestic abuse and just really... I mean, it's kind of dark humor, but it's like,
Well, they also bring up an important point. Like, if call the police is something that it takes action on, whether you tell it to or not. And, they mentioned the story where they did the news story about the dollhouse, and all the Alexas ordered a dollhouse. Well, how many times does the phrase "call the police" come up on television?
But it knows. It knows. I think that's really interesting because one of the Google articles, like one of the Google Home advertisements or whatever, they actually keyed the Google Home devices to not respond to the Google Home advertisement ahead of time. So they were able to fingerprint the audio and say, this is a false positive, don't respond to this. So there's a level of sophistication there that is downright disturbing that it's that good.
Yeah, and it's going to know what you're talking about at all times. That's just a terrifying thing.
Oh, well, if you're an app developer, you can develop what are called skills, I think. So you write a program that extends the functionality of these smart speakers, and every different vendor calls it something different. But in, I guess, the Amazon vernacular, it's called a skill. And so you can enable your smart speaker to have a new skill. But the developers for that are not necessarily internal Amazon developers. Like Apple built the App Store, Amazon and other companies want to build an app store around voice recognition. The problem is that things get weird when anybody can just sign up and write an application for a smart speaker, because is Google or Amazon going to give you voice transcripts of everything that was happening to trigger that skill? I mean, that seems like you're giving up an awful lot of privacy as a user of those skills. So how do you draw the line? So our next article is about, they're trying to figure that out, but they're going to give developers transcripts of the things that were used to trigger those skills.
Well, they're debating. Amazon is debating whether or not to do that. Turns out Google's already done it. They're like, yeah, here you go. Take a listen. Now, this is not like everything that you say. They don't just like give them access to the logs, which they probably do log, keep in mind. It's just what triggered a particular thing. But if you have a very distinctive voice and you order embarrassing things from Amazon to your Alexa, hey, got any app developer friends?
It's like, wow, Morgan Freeman is a user of my skill for this, and he orders very disturbing things from Amazon. Wow, who would have guessed? Verizon. If you've got Verizon and you ask Verizon for help doing anything in the last 2-3 months, something like that, you're going to want to change your call-in password and your PIN number and some other information like that. Millions of Verizon customer information was exposed on an Amazon S3 bucket that had no password.
Now, the really weird thing about this one is the company, it's an Israeli company called NICE, and they are tied to Celebrite and Hacker Team, the companies that build the cell phone hacking stuff, like the Stingray, and what's the other one called?
Oh, I can't remember. But basically the companies that can dump your phone, really easily.
Yeah, these are like, it's not stuff that they sell to consumers. It's stuff they sell to the CIA and police departments and stuff like that. So why does this company need logs of Verizon help desk calls? And why do they have it on Amazon S3 with no password?
Why is this company even doing this?
Yeah.
It makes no sense. No sense at all.
And
Unless
they were from all around the country, different call centers. So it wasn't like one in particular. It was like they were sampling the entire country.
That's really disturbing. Somebody should look into that, because I don't understand what that company would be doing with that unless it's, whatever. Actually, I think there was a quote in the article that said, why are you doing this? What's your connection here? And the response was kind of vague. It was like, hey, we don't control what carriers do with our software. It's like, right. What?
So what is Verizon doing when, is it if you call the help desk, you go on a watch list?
Well, I mean, that's a new low for customer service, but I mean, once you get below a 10% approval rating, you got to do some really creative things to piss off your customers.
But you mentioned they do have the PIN, so they could literally take your identity with this. They could call up and have your phone deactivated. They could maybe even start a new phone on your plan.
It's easy to order iPads, as it turns out. Yeah. That's already been happening, apparently. People are having iPads ordered on their Verizon account and shipped wherever.
So if you've done a Verizon help desk, for sure, update your information.
There's a Swedish security company that has the CEO was declared bankrupt after his identity was stolen. And the really neat thing about this is his identity was stolen some months ago. Somebody applied for a loan in his stolen identity's name. All of this was done under the radar, and then he filed for the person who stole his identity filed for bankruptcy in order to get out of paying the loan back.
Now this is going to get written off. He's not going to lose all of his money, and it's going to be fixed. But it's really embarrassing. Because this is a security company that claims to protect you from this very thing. Now, you would assume that the CEO is using his own service. I mean, probably should get a freebie, right? But it wasn't able to stop whoever stole his identity. They were able to get a pretty serious loan in his name.
Now, the other thing that's interesting here is that the way that things are done in Sweden, because everything is done electronically, may also be partially to blame here, because they were able to gather a huge amount of information on the CEO, personal data, and things like that, which was enough information to secure the loan in the first place and work with a loan officer, identity theft, go through the motions at a court hearing. I mean, it's honestly a very impressive feat that they were able to pull it off using basically public information in Sweden. It says a lot. I mean, in America, we would already be there were it not for the inertia of people that are not computer literate. So this is perhaps a warning for other countries. Hey, on that whole digitize everything, not so fast.
He also lost his position as CEO and he's off the board, but not because he embarrassed the company, but because when you declare bankruptcy, you can't stay in these positions of power. So they're like, no, we're working to get him back in there as soon as this is cleared up.
Speaking of governments doing weird things, Congress here in America is close to approving a new space agency, although there is some dissent on that. It's like, we need like the Space Marines or whatever.
Well, the dissent is coming from the Air Force because the Air Force considers the air and space to be their territory. They actually do have a small little program that was designed for like, hey, if we ever need to fight in space, the Air Force is going to take care of that. Well, we're coming up on the the budget for the defense budget. So this is really just something that's like, hey, I don't know, let's get a space army, right? We need more money. And when you look at how much money America pays the United States, for those of you who get pissed when we say America, the United States pays for our defense budget. The idea of padding it more for a space army is kind of ludicrous.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, can NASA supply those vessels or something? Because we would get other useful things out of NASA. Other companies, I don't know, not so much. Well, our AI story this week, I don't know, I really wanted this to be a robot, but it's not a robot yet, it's just AI.
Yeah, we have, actually they're all AI, but we have several robot stories.
We've got automation coming for highly paid doctors. This article is talking about radiologists specifically, because sort of the nature of the game for radiology has changed. In the past, radiologists might look at a couple x-rays, maybe a couple CT scans, but now the machinery is so advanced that you can get hundreds of CT scan images, you can get hundreds of x-rays from different angles at different depths, depths of focus, whatever. I don't know, I'm not a radiologist. And so for a single patient, they might have to look at hundreds or thousands of images. Well, the software is doing the work now, and there's a piece of software that is able to do at least a passable job, maybe even better than that, in about 15 minutes, what would take a radiologist at least 40 or 15 seconds, what would normally take a radiologist 45 minutes.
So the idea here is, and this is sort of the common story among like robot replacement, because even in this article, they play it down. They're like, no. Robots aren't going to make the decisions. We still need humans to do that. Robots are just going to help. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to get your scan, and it's going to go through the AI, and the AI is going to be like, look at this. This is a tumor. Here it is. Here's 15 different examples. That's a tumor. That's the problem. And a radiologist is going to look at that and be like, yep, on to the next one. And
sounds good to me.
If the AI can't find something, then the radiologist might spend the 45 minutes. But what that's going to mean is you don't need 2 radiologists. You just need 1. Maybe not even need 5. Maybe you just need 1 instead of 5. So this is going to be disruptive. And it's usually we talk about like factory work and construction and stuff like that. But now the robots are bleeding into the really high-end white-collar jobs like doctors and, it turns out, lawyers.
Lawyers, no. The world's first robot lawyer is now available in all 50 states. Now, this is actually the robot that we've reported on before, the one that was helping with traffic tickets and parking tickets and things like that. It's now available in all 50 states.
I don't remember what the original state was, but it was just a matter of getting all the individual state laws and the little weird, municipalities and stuff and incorporating all of those so that based on where you were, it wouldn't give you bad advice.
Yeah.
It's basically the same robot, but now everybody can use it. And this thing has had an insane amount of success getting rid of parking tickets and traffic violations.
Little technicalities that it's able to find, little loopholes, little things. It's like, let me help you write an appeal for this. And they're like, this is too much work. It could also be that those municipalities are just inundated with a ton of paperwork, because the article mentions the developer also wants to sell the municipality software for dealing with the automated responses from his AI.
Just AI haggling over whether or not you should be fined.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, the Audi A8, this is a $100,000 plus, entry-level vehicle, but is the first production car to achieve Level 3 autonomy. So what does Level 3 autonomy mean exactly?
Level 2 is currently what you have with Tesla and, all the big leaders in the industry. And that is where it expects you to pay attention. You must look at the road. You must have your hand on the wheel. A lot of those cars will actually bitch at you if you don't do that. They're like, hey, pay attention. And the one guy, the big Tesla case, it turned out he died because he was watching Harry Potter and he wasn't looking at the road. Well, Level 3, up to 37 miles an hour, requires nothing from you. You can be in the back seat if you want.
Yeah, they talk about the guy was horsing around with his kids in the back seat while the car was driving them around. It's still at 37 miles an hour. They're talking about, like, I guess, high traffic areas. So if you get in traffic and you need to, like, make turns or do whatever, up to 37 miles an hour. Level 4, presumably, they say by 2020 will be, highway speeds, but also completely automated.
Yeah, basically we've reached full automation. It's just how fast do we trust this vehicle to travel at that speed? And so the next levels will just keep building on. You can go faster and faster without paying any attention to what's going on.
And it'll also solve the little like, I'm sure there'll be little bugs in the software that does up to 37 miles an hour, and the fixes for those will be incorporated into the software, which will, unlock speeds in the future. It's possible that a software update for this would do it. I mean, the car is really super tricked out, but honestly, that level of gear in a luxury car, to be sure, but still entry level around 103,000 US. That's really impressive for that level. I mean, you're talking about a supercomputer basically that you're hauling around in your car.
They also mentioned that the hardware itself, while it is like, the nicest cameras and the best sensors, it's using the LiDAR that everybody else is using. So it's not anything new that they have. They just have the best of it and the best software, and they trust it enough to actually take that liability, tell you to take your hands off the wheel.
Well, from the time we're recording this till the time comes out Tuesday, we're taking a little bit of a gamble with the next story. But Ethereum prices are right now around $150, or they're heading towards, I think it bottomed out at around 141 even after this article. So that may or may not still be the case. The only reason we're reporting on it is because if you're waiting to get a video card, now might be the time.
Well, you might wait a little bit more. What is it, 300 at the top? Something like that?
Yeah.
Now, the Ethereum, I think a big part of this is a knock-on effect from Bitcoin. Ethereum, we're heading toward the doubling of the difficulty, which is a big deal. But with Bitcoin, we're heading toward the civil war. So there's this debate about Bitcoin.
The hard fork.
Was it called SegWit or something like that? So there's a debate about the blockchain. Bitcoin, the blockchain has gotten huge. The transactions have gotten very slow because they have to be confirmed and it takes a long time. So one camp is saying, hey, why don't we sort of centralize some of the blockchain? Why don't we take some of that complexity out of it? And the other side, which is the miners, are saying that will lower the value of our miners. No way in hell that we're going to do that. So there's kind of a middle ground called, it's a new software. I think it's called SegWit or something like that. That comes out July 21st. Now, if everybody adopts that, the blocks get bigger and everybody's happy and we continue on. If everybody doesn't adopt that, we may actually split into two kinds of Bitcoin, which is going to be crazy for the market price. That we'll figure out by August 1st. So if you're in the Bitcoin, Ethereum market, get ready for some volatility. If you love to gamble, maybe buy the dip.
Oh, it's just it's magic internet money. I mean,
well, when you think, you read these articles and it's like, but Bitcoin is backed by nothing. And it's like, Federal Reserve notes are backed by nothing.
There come the downvotes. In other news, SoundCloud. Let's talk about SoundCloud because that's something different, right? SoundCloud.
Well, last week it was Tumblr.
Tumblr, yeah. So this is another one of those services that are kind of free, but they haven't really figured out a way to monetize. SoundCloud offers, artists the ability to upload their own mixes, music. It's basically YouTube for music, but with a lot of extra features and maybe a less toxic community than YouTube. Perhaps.
And really popular. Like considered to be, it sets sort of the tone online. Like a lot of people use it, and it's really well respected, and it's a great website, and it doesn't make money.
Yeah, it's laying off 40% of its staff in a bid to become actually cash flow positive.
And they estimate, unless they get more funding, they've got it's a number of days, like maybe not even 2 months worth of cash to burn through before it's just over. It's done.
Now, they have entertained buyout offers in the past from Twitter and other companies, but I don't think any buyout offers are on the table. The article specifically talks about the CEO wanting to maintain their independence. So I think they're trying to avoid a buyout. But that definitely will happen just for the user base if they're not able to get it together.
Yeah, and I don't think it looks the same if one of those big companies buys it, because at some point you do have to make that profitable.
Now, our next story was really surprising for me. It's a story that says the PC shipments have hit their lowest levels in a decade. Not since 2007 have PC shipments been this low. But this is really not expected, because some of the people that I've been talking to on the inside of the industry have been really happy with where the PC DIY market has been.
Well, they talk about, this is a research group called Gartner, and then there's another research group called IDC, or a Market Watch group, or whatever. IDC said PC sales are up. Gartner says PC sales are lowest since 2007. So I don't know what the disconnect there is. Yeah, I don't know. But one thing they agree on is Dell is doing great. Everybody
Dell
else
sales are up.
Yeah, everybody else not so much.
Apple's sales were down 9.6%, which they attributed to Apple using old hardware and not refreshing.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you got to think, with all the excitement of a new generation of CPUs, the one people left out in the cold are the Apple users. They get nothing.
When can I expect my Core i9 Mac Pro? And it's like
2025.
Yeah. Somebody has been going around buying Chrome extensions and adding tons of ads to them. Particle is the newest victim, which was a pretty cool Chrome plugin to add preferences to YouTube. You could change the color scheme of YouTube, and it made other enhancements to the YouTube website just by injecting code. Well, now it also injects ads in addition to that stuff.
This thing was actually useless because YouTube did the UI update, and this extension depended on it, using that old theme. So it doesn't anymore. So a lot of the features just stopped working, and this guy's like, okay, I'm going to retire that, and I'm going to start working on a new version. And then he got a call out of nowhere, and they were like, we would like to purchase this for a large sum of money. And he really didn't even question it. He was like, oh, that doesn't work anymore. Sure, take it. And they immediately started using it to track users and introduce ads.
This is not the only extension this has happened to, so beware if you're updating Chrome extensions, or if you're a Chrome extension junkie. This kind of thing, it could probably even happen in the extension market for other browsers, things like Firefox. So definitely be aware of that if you're using a lot of plugins, that one of your plugins doesn't go rogue or something like that.
They was found out because people started to install it, and they were like, wait a minute, why do you need all these new permissions? So I don't know what's the case when they push an update, it asks you if you want to increase the permissions, right?
Yeah.
So keep an eye on that, because the plugin that you love could have been sold out from under the people that owned it, and it could be something entirely different now.
Our next story is really exciting because you will literally be able to add memes to jeans. Yes, that's right. We're adding GIFs to your DNA.
It's so useless, but at the same time so impressive. So this is actually
just some errors.
Yeah, there's some artifacting. This is E. coli. They took E. coli and they added basically an animated GIF. I think it was 25 frames.
Yeah.
This is old. This was the first motion picture, right?
Yeah. It was like on animal motion, and so they made it really small. This is what they sent into the E. coli, and this is what actually came out. Now they only added 1 frame per day, so they went pretty slow. But there was a fair bit of information encoded in the DNA here,
and the sequence itself. So just with this E. coli, you know what all the frames are and the sequence to play them in, which is incredible.
DNA data storage might be one of the most dense data storage mediums that we are ever able to come up with, but it's probably going to be pretty slow.
Can you imagine the day when like actual humans are the only record of some terrible secret? And I mean, that's a movie waiting to be written right there. You know, this guy, he could unlock clean energy, and one side's trying to kill him and the other side's trying to extract his blood.
That might be one way that information could survive the ages, is like, you know, you travel to space or whatever and you encode all of that information in junk DNA. That would be great.
Or like a royal family. Like, you know, protecting them is paramount because they have the secrets in their blood.
I think there would probably be a lot of mutations in that DNA generation over generation, because there would be no pressure to, you know, keep it error free.
Well, I mean, you could, you know, check it every month. You might have to discard some babies. It's like, I'm sorry.
We talked last week about Tesla having some sales problems in Hong Kong. This is kind of a follow-up, kind of related, but it's more information. So there was a subsidy for Tesla electric vehicles in Hong Kong. There isn't anymore, and so now nobody really wants to buy a Tesla in Hong Kong, which is historically one of their best markets.
The subsidy was pretty much half of the price. The price almost doubled. Now, it's important to note that there are subsidies in America, United States, for Tesla as well. And
well, actually,
if this were to happen in America, United States, then most likely everybody would lose interest as well, because a lot of Tesla's success comes from the federal government handing you a big pile of money if you buy a Tesla.
Oh, because we're trying to, you know, advance new technology and new batteries and things like that. No, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to invest in Elon Musk. He seems to be doing a bang-up job, but at the same time, it's not the government's job to pick winners and losers. And
as we can see, when you pull that support out from under them, people lose all interest. Now, he did, or at least Tesla, you know, made a statement, and they were like, "We think this is fine. We think what happened was everybody bought all the Teslas leading up to this because they knew this was coming." And so for a little while, they won't buy them, but we're sure it's going to pick back up. It remains to be seen.
Yeah, the graph was literally a flat line. So, you know what else is not picking back up? Subscriptions to Pornhub in Russia. Now, we talked about this a little bit, but this article has a lot more information than we had previously. Basically, it really is the case that you need a passport to watch Pornhub in Russia.
Now, this is not necessarily about pornography. I've actually seen some, like, YouTube will censor videos, especially if it's like violence or something like that, you know, people getting killed. And one place that you can almost always go and see that video is on Pornhub, because they don't care. It's Pornhub. I mean, you can't go to Pornhub and expect not to see something, you know, X-rated. And people are like, I wasn't expecting to be offended on Pornhub. So they're using it in Russia to post videos that can't get published anywhere else. Videos that are critical of Putin and his inner circle and the government itself, and they don't like that. So they've been adding more and more restrictions on Pornhub to try to keep people away from it without outright just banning it.
And so this was almost accidental. Russia said, we're going to order ISPs to block Pornhub in Russia unless you do something about underage people using Pornhub in Russia. You need to make them have an account through like the social network, VKontakte, I think is how it's pronounced. And what I guess was not necessarily something that Pornhub realized is that you need a passport in order to use that social network, or you need identifying information in your SIM card from your phone, something like that. And so that's easily traceable back to an individual.
But I can guarantee you that the Russian government is recording your Pornhub watching habits. What categories do you like the most? That's being stored somewhere.
To use against you.
Yeah.
Oh, Elon Musk. We switching gears again back to Elon Musk, I guess. This was we were kind of a lot on news, and so we decided to include this. This is a pretty good little interview with Elon Musk, where he's talking things like trip to Mars and, you know, putting people on there, where technology is going, but also how scared to death he is of artificial intelligence destroying humanity.
He also brings up the population bomb, which I'm always happy when people in, you know, the modern view are like, hey, let's talk about this problem that we have with way too many people on the earth. But the big headline here is he says that AI is basically going to kill us all if we don't get it under control now. He talks about robots walking down the street killing people. That was literally one of the quotes. And maybe he's not wrong. We've definitely seen AI sort of. Did you see the story? I didn't include it, but there's a story about how I think one of those Google AIs has now developed its own language.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's not human readable. And they're like, is this a good idea? Should we have this?
It was almost an experiment. I think we did talk about an early version of that or an early report on that a few months ago. But I mean, AI is going to solve a lot of problems, but it's not necessarily apparent to human operators what it sees. So like with the radiology thing, it's like here, these are standouts because, this, and this, but it's not necessarily able to convey to the human operator in a conversational kind of way why those images were flagged. It doesn't the algorithm is such that it's not necessarily discernible that you could, figure that out.
And AI cannot incorporate morality or, the social contract into the things it does. It's hard logic. There was another story that we intentionally left out, but we'll mention it just briefly, about how AI is turning out to be super racist. And of course, AI can't be racist. That doesn't factor into it. What AI is doing is it's looking at statistics, and it's looking at like, if you're a certain race, then you're more likely to be X, Y, and Z. And it's just using numbers. But when humans look at that, they're like, look at you, you're being racist. This is not acceptable. Even though it's not really racist, it's just numbers. And so is that a good thing or a bad thing? And AI is not concerned about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just trying to solve that problem.
Well, not necessarily also racist, but I mean, if somebody is cornered into having to do not socially acceptable action A as a matter of survival or something else, they're going to do it regardless of the demographic that's in that position. It's just the current state of the world is not an ideal one. Therefore, the things that will be reflected in an AI-based analysis will also not be ideal.
So he's not wrong. AI could be really scary if it gets out of control, but I don't know. Maybe I don't know if he's just trying to grab a headline here. He does seem to enjoy the spotlight.
It was, AI is because it is amoral. It will be wielded by a petty thief as easily as it is like a head of state who would very carefully weigh the use of AI. It is potentially weaponizable. So I don't know.
Did you just say that with a straight face?
What?
Head of state using it responsibly, really?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's easy to imagine a hypothetical head of state who would very carefully weigh the use of whatever versus like some it's like
you watch too much Star Trek.
Yeah, probably. Well, and with that, we've come to the end of another awful episode of the news. We will see you next week.
See you next week.